It was a quiet Thursday evening, and I was working the closing shift at a small bookstore nestled between a bakery and a nail salon on Main Street. I'd been working there part-time since I started college, and normally, I loved the peaceful atmosphere, just the scent of old paper, soft background music, and the occasional customer browsing through forgotten titles. But that night, something felt different. It had been raining for hours, and the steady tapping on the windows made everything feel heavier, quieter. It was close to 8 p.m., just 30 minutes before closing, when I noticed him. He'd been in the store for at least an hour. At first, I didn't think much of it. People get lost in books all the time. But this man wasn't reading. He was pretending to flip through pages, barely even looking down. What caught my attention was that every time I glanced in his direction, he was already staring at me. And he wasn't trying to hide it, his eyes didn't dart away like most people's would. He wore a gray hoodie pulled low over his face, and although his expression never changed, there was something off about him. Not exactly threatening, but unnerving. I tried to ignore it. After all, I was used to the occasional odd customer. But when my coworker Beth had to leave early because of a family emergency, I couldn't shake the uneasiness crawling up my spine. Now I was alone in the store, with him. And something told me this shift wouldn't end like any of the others I'd worked before. I tried to stay focused, wiping down the front counter and organizing the display near the register, but I couldn't stop glancing over my shoulder. The man in the gray hoodie hadn't moved much. He stayed in the same general area, walking slowly between the same 3 shelves, sometimes lingering near the fiction section, then doubling back without picking up a single book. He still hadn't said a word. I told myself to stop overthinking. Maybe he was just lost in thought. Maybe he was waiting for someone. Maybe he just liked being somewhere dry while it rained. But none of those explanations made me feel any better. A little after 8:10 p.m., I dimmed the overhead lights as part of our normal closing routine. That's when I noticed something strange. He was now closer to the staff-only section, where the storage room and break room were. He didn't go inside, but he was browsing near a part of the store that customers rarely had any reason to be near. I cleared my throat and walked over with as much confidence as I could fake. "Hey, just so you know, we'll be closing soon," I said, trying to sound casual. He didn't respond, just looked at me. A few seconds passed before he gave a small nod, then turned back toward the shelf, pretending to scan the spines. I returned to the front, but my nerves were on edge now. I considered calling my manager or even a non-emergency police line, but I didn't want to look paranoid. I kept telling myself, he hasn't done anything. He's just weird, not dangerous. But then, around 8:20, I looked up, and he was gone. Not at the shelves. Not near the front door. Just gone. My heart skipped. I quickly walked around the store, scanning every aisle. Nothing. That's when I heard it, the soft creak of a door from the back storage room. I froze. There was no one else in the store. That door should have been closed. And I suddenly realized, I had forgotten to lock it. My feet felt like they were glued to the floor. I stared toward the hallway that led to the storage room, heart pounding so hard it echoed in my ears. That door was never supposed to creak. It was thick, heavy, and always stayed shut unless someone opened it. And I knew for a fact that I hadn't locked it earlier. I grabbed the heaviest object within reach, a metal bookend, and slowly made my way down the hallway. Every step felt like it took forever. The overhead light flickered once. Classic. I whispered a nervous laugh to myself. This is straight out of a horror movie, I muttered. The hallway opened into the back room, a dim space filled with boxes, carts, and tall shelves of inventory. I hesitated at the doorway, then stepped inside, holding my breath. At first, nothing. Then, movement. Behind a stack of boxes near the corner, I saw it, a flash of gray. He was crouching. Hiding. I froze, hand tightening around the bookend. The man stood up slowly, like he realized he'd been caught. For a second, we just stared at each other. Up close, I could finally see his face clearly. He was older than I thought, with a pale, drawn expression, and something wild in his eyes. In one hand, he was holding a duffel bag. "What are you doing back here?" I asked, louder than I meant to. He didn't answer. Instead, he stepped around the boxes, looking like he was calculating something. My escape route? His. I took a step back toward the exit. "I'm calling the police," I said, voice shaking but loud enough for him to hear. Suddenly, he lunged, not at me, but toward the emergency exit door. He shoved it open so hard it banged against the wall and vanished into the rainy night, the bag still in his hand. Alarms blared. The emergency door automatically triggered the store's silent alarm. I stood there frozen, bookend still clutched in my fist, trembling as red lights flashed near the ceiling. It was over in seconds, but it felt like hours. I stood in the back room, heart racing, my grip on the metal bookend slowly loosening. The emergency exit door was still wide open, rain spilling in across the concrete floor. The alarm continued to blare, echoing off the walls like a warning bell I'd never heard before. I snapped out of my daze and ran to the front, fumbling with the store phone. My fingers were shaking so badly it took me 3 tries to dial 911. The dispatcher picked up immediately. I explained what happened as clearly as I could. A man had been acting suspiciously, snuck into the back room, and then ran out the emergency exit with a bag. The operator kept me on the line until the police arrived, less than 5 minutes later. 2 officers entered, drenched from the rain, and did a quick sweep of the store while I stayed near the front counter. I could still feel my pulse in my throat. When one of them returned, he asked if I'd seen what was inside the duffel bag. I shook my head. I hadn't gotten close enough. But I was sure he had been hiding something. A few minutes later, one of the officers called out from the back. "We've got something," he said. He came out holding a small box the man had apparently dropped during his escape. Inside were several high-end electronics, tablets, headphones, even a couple of shrink-wrapped phones. Not bookstore items. Stolen, most likely. They told me that 2 stores in the plaza had reported break-ins earlier in the day. It looked like he'd used the bookstore to hide out, stash the merchandise, or worse, wait until closing for some other reason. I didn't want to think about that possibility too long. They took my statement and promised to keep me updated. One officer even waited until my manager arrived before they left. The store was quiet again. Too quiet. I looked around and realized just how vulnerable I had been. I'd made it through the night, but I knew something had changed. And I would never close the store alone again. After the police left and my manager took over, I finally sat down behind the counter, still trying to catch my breath. The store smelled like rain and damp cardboard. I stared out the front windows, half expecting to see the man's gray hoodie appear again in the dark. But all I saw were the flickering streetlights and an empty parking lot. My manager offered to let me go home early, but I stayed until closing. I needed the closure, I guess, some sense of normalcy. We cleaned up the mess in the back room together, locked every single door twice, and set the alarm with extra care before leaving. Driving home that night, the rain had eased up, but my nerves hadn't. Every pair of headlights behind me felt suspicious. Every shadow seemed to move. But when I finally walked into my apartment, locked the door, and collapsed onto the couch, I felt something I hadn't since the shift started, safe. Over the next few days, I kept replaying the night in my head. What if I hadn't heard the door? What if I hadn't trusted my gut? The thought made my stomach turn. The police never found the man, at least not right away. But the plaza upgraded its security, and my store made a new rule: no more solo closings. That helped, a little. Most of all, I learned to stop doubting myself. That voice inside, the one that whispered something's wrong, wasn't paranoia. It was instinct. And next time, I promised myself, I'd listen even sooner.